Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. If you're tuning in, you're obviously a focused learner who wants to cut right through the noise and get straight to the structural facts that are actively shaping our world right now. And today, well, we have an absolutely massive one to cover. We're looking at the first week of June 2026. This was the definitive moment when artificial intelligence completely stopped being this wild venture capital experiment and forcefully shifted into a structural Wall Street reality. We are quite literally witnessing an inflection point that changes exactly how enterprises buy, build, and deploy technology. So let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. $1.75 trillion. To really understand the scale of what we're dealing with right now, you just have to look at the math. That number is the IPO target valuation for SpaceX. And in the exact same week, Anthropic closed its Series H funding, becoming the world's most valuable private company at a $965 billion valuation. To put $1 trillion into a physical perspective, if you took a stack of $1 bills, it would stretch over 67,000 miles high. That is literally over a quarter of the way to the moon. So this is the sheer mathematical scale of the assets the public market is currently trying to price.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, AI hits Wall Street. Second, the price floor collapses. Third, the autonomous workforce era. Fourth, the autonomous workforce era. And finally, navigating the new rules.
All right, Section 1, AI hits Wall Street and how the competitive map condenses.
The wild, sprawling frontier of AI startups that we've gotten used to is violently consolidating into just a handful of massive public market titans. I mean, Anthropic didn't just hit a $965 billion valuation out of nowhere. Their annual recurring revenue completely exploded from $10 billion to $47 billion in a single year, which is heavily driven by enterprise adoption. Meanwhile, the whole landscape is simplifying dramatically. xAI has actually been dissolved as a standalone company and folded into a new division called SpaceX AI, and its massive Colossus supercomputer down in Memphis, that's now being leased to Anthropic. So when the dust settles here, the frontier market is effectively down to four primary titans: Alphabet, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Anthropic.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. The price floor collapses, marking a period of structural deflation. Now, while those corporate valuations are skyrocketing, the actual cost of the technology is doing the exact opposite. It's getting structurally, permanently cheaper. And this is perhaps the most shocking data point of the entire year. For the exact same workload, Claude Opus 4.7 costs $25 per million output tokens. Meanwhile, DeepSeek V4 Pro just made its price cut permanent at 87 cents per million tokens. That is a 34 times price deflation. And I want to be incredibly clear about this. This is not some temporary marketing promotion. This is a permanent structural collapse of the global AI pricing floor. Open source models can now match proprietary alternatives for the vast majority of enterprise workloads at a total fraction of the cost.
So the crucial point is this. We are currently riding a 10x per year inference cost improvement curve. Think about that for a second. If your organization has an enterprise AI budget or a 3-year strategic plan that was built on old, frontier-tier pricing assumptions from even just 6 months ago, yeah, that plan is instantly outdated. You need an immediate audit of your AI cost stack before your very next budget cycle, because the underlying economics of computation have fundamentally changed.
Moving right along to Section 3, the autonomous workforce era, looking at talent and code. We have to transition now from the raw cost of the tech to its real-world impact on software engineering and the human workforce. Because if you still believe the narrative that AI just, assists human developers, this data point definitively ends that conversation. Cognition, the company behind the AI software engineer Devin, recently disclosed their internal production metrics. 89% of their live, shipped production code is now written autonomously by AI. Only 11% is written by actual humans. This isn't some future projection or a lab benchmark. This is live infrastructure operating right now, today.
And you can see the ripples of that autonomy hitting the broader workforce. 50,000. That's the number of AI-attributed layoffs in just the first half of 2026. And what makes this really significant is that this is the first year major corporations, we're talking Meta, Intuit, Cisco, are explicitly citing artificial intelligence in their earnings calls as the primary cause for these workforce reductions. The shift from human labor to autonomous systems is now officially a line item being openly reported to Wall Street.
Which brings us to Section 4, the human buffer concept, and why AI actually fails.
Now look, this is not a perfectly smooth transition for companies. To understand why AI actually breaks when you deploy it in live enterprise environments, we have to look at the human buffer. The human buffer is essentially this invisible layer of human judgment, correction, hesitation, interpretation, and escalation that totally prevents weak systems from failing in public. Basically, in every single organization, there are broken processes that only work because a human secretly patches them on the fly. When you deploy an AI agent, it completely bypasses these unspoken human compensation mechanisms, and it does so at machine speed.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where those breakdowns happen. At every single point where a human steps in to secretly correct a system, you have a hidden debt signal. Say an analyst regularly checks two conflicting systems and reconciles them manually. Well, that's data debt. If you automate that with AI, it just acts blindly on the wrong source. If an engineer manually restarts a failing integration job, that's tech debt, and AI will just trigger repeated, rapid failures. When a supervisor applies judgment to some weird edge case exception, that is personnel debt, and AI will process that exception as standard practice. The takeaway here is that every place your team currently steps in to just make things work is exactly where an AI agent will inevitably fail unless those silent rules are actively documented and coded.
All right, our final section, number 5, navigating the new rules, focusing on guardrails and constraints. So how do we actually lead through this? Well, leaders must operate within some pretty severe macro constraints, starting with the physical supply chain. We can talk about software and agents all day long, but AI runs on physical hardware, specifically high bandwidth memory, or HBM. HBM is basically the new oil of the digital economy. SK Hynix currently holds a 57% market share in this space, and they recently crossed a $1 trillion valuation. Why? Because they literally have a 3-year supply backlog. Demand has utterly outstripped global production capacity. If you're planning major compute investments, this is the ultimate hard constraint on scaling. You simply can't buy your way out of a 3-year physical backlog.
And alongside those hardware constraints, we have new regulatory frameworks to navigate. Recently, the Trump administration signed a substantive AI executive order. The core mechanism of this order is the establishment of a voluntary 30-day national security review window for frontier models before they're actually released. Additionally, it directs federal agencies to build out benchmarking frameworks. Now, for organizations, particularly federal contractors, this has immediate compliance implications. It signals a highly accelerated timeline for security documentation, and it actively sets the standard for requests for proposal language heading into the fourth quarter.
So, what do you actually do with all this on Monday morning? Here is your immediate checklist. 1. Reevaluate your vendor risk. Those single provider assumptions are definitely stale. 2. Audit your cost stack today so you can capture that massive deflationary pricing. 3. Document your EO compliance posture. 4. Update your software cost structures for autonomous coding. And 5. Review your governance capacity before any layoffs happen so you don't accidentally fire your critical human buffers.
Which really leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. Is your organization actually built for the trillion-dollar AI era? We've seen the hardware bottlenecks, we've looked at the collapsing price floors, and we've talked about those invisible human debts hiding away in your workflows. The venture capital training wheels? Yeah, they're officially off, and the public market is demanding real structural discipline. It is time to build for the new reality. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning out there.